If you have hyperextended knees, you've probably spent a lot of time in class feeling like your body is fighting you. You get corrections like straighten your legs or pull up more, and no matter how hard you try, nothing seems to change. Closing in fifth without bending your knees feels impossible, and your standing leg often feels unstable and unreliable in center. But here's the thing, it's probably not that you're doing it wrong. It's that nobody has ever explained how to work with your anatomy. Today, I'm joined by Shane, a ballet teacher and coach, and the founder of Athletistry. Shane dealt with hypermobile knees throughout his entire career as a professional ballet dancer, so he really understands what it's like. In this episode, we cover what's actually happening in your body when you have hypermobility, why so many corrections don't translate, and how to approach challenges like closing in fifth and finding stability in your standing leg, so you can finally start working with your anatomy instead of against it. If you've ever felt frustrated or discouraged by your hypermobility, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. Well, thank you so much, Shane, for being on the podcast today. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Thanks for having me, Hannah.
Yeah, so we are going to be talking today specifically about hypermobility in the knees. I know obviously you can have hypermobility in other parts of your body, but knees is very common. It's something that I have experienced myself. And you were really the first person that I saw on social media who talked about this in a way that resonated with my own experience. And so I'm so excited to have you on because you also have quite a bit of hypermobility in your legs too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think when they measured it when I was still dancing, I think it was like I want to say like 15 centimeters of hyperextension in my knees, which is a lot. I mean, it's not a small amount, let's put it that way. And if like I used to just like sit down before class and just like bounce my legs and my feet would flop and they just kind of like come off the ground. Come off the ground. So yes, quite a bit of hyperextension, which is not easy to work with.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, talking to you about it because you have personally experienced it, I always find that you get the best information from people who have lived something firsthand. So I think you're going to be the expert on this topic, but maybe you could start even just by talking a little bit more anatomically about what hyperextension in the knees actually is, maybe for someone who doesn't know or isn't sure if they have it.
So essentially, the muscles and the ligaments and tendons that control our joints, they are designed to stop the range of motion of the bones at a certain point. And when we have hypermobility, or in the case of the knees, hyperextended knees, what's happening is those ligaments are not restricting the movement, and it's allowing it to go past a fully stretched point. So like when we assess this, if I had someone coming in to assess posture and we were assessing this, I'd have them stand and do a few jumps just to kind of get a natural postural alignment. And then I would look at them from behind, from the side, and then from the front. Generally, looking at them from the side is where we're going to see the most hypermobility just from a natural perspective, because you can see is the knee locking out behind the line of the hips. So if you're watching them from the side and you're looking at the side of their body, does their knee stretch and go behind the line of where their pelvis is? And that's going to be the kind of easiest way to determine, do I have hyperextension or not?
Yeah. What are some of the common things that someone might be experiencing or receiving corrections on if they have hypermobility in their knees?
For a lot of people, it's pain free, but for some, they may end up getting pain behind the knees. The PCL, the posterior cruciate ligament, could be causing some pain. So it runs behind the knee and it can get overstretched. If you've ever been dancing for a while or standing for a long time and you start to get that kind of pain behind the knees, that like, where did this come from? I didn't do anything. It could be because you're dropping into that, locking into the hyperextension. Oftentimes, dancers with hyperextended knees will also have a more pronounced anterior pelvic tilt. So they might get more pain in their low back. They might get more stiffness in their hips. They might feel like their hip flexors are really tight because of how their legs are stretching. And then they feel like, oh, I always have to stretch. I always have to stretch. I'm not ever getting loose enough. And that kind of, sometimes that mentality can kind of be confusing, because it's like, oh, I have hypermobility. Why do I feel like I'm always tight? And it's just the postural alignment that your body is being put into because of where your joint is locking out, essentially. So that could be something that some dancers may be experiencing. Other things that will often come into play, especially in ballet, are where's the knee stretching? What is a stretched position of the knee? Is it that fully locked out place where the knee is at its full range of hyperextension? Is it a straight line, like what we would expect to have for somebody who doesn't have that hypermobile range in their knees? And how do we deal with that? A lot of dancers do struggle to find that because oftentimes people with hypermobility also have a reduction in proprioceptive awareness. So the fact that yes, they can stretch their knees to that point, but they don't know where that straight line actually is, and it takes a long time and a lot of work to find that and develop that awareness.
Yeah, that is something I have personally really struggled with is not being able to feel when my legs are straight when I'm in, specifically arabesque. It's really hard for me. I feel like my leg is straight, but it's not. And it is, like you mentioned, it's especially frustrating when you're someone who you're like, I can go not only straight, but past straight, but then I can't even get straight at all, when you're in that position. And yeah, I've really experienced that. That was something I heard you say online that really unlocked something in my brain because I think I struggle to understand how both of those things could be true at the same time. How I could have some hypermobility, but then also really struggle with straightening my leg. Like it seems like they would be, conflicting. But yeah, it's interesting how the proprioception part plays into that.
Yeah, well, and arabesque is an interesting one as well, right? Like if we look at that, yeah, when you're putting your leg behind you like that, you're going into hip extension. So if like what we were talking about just before with the anterior tilt, if the hips are tighter and you're trying to then put yourself into hip extension, the hip is going to be that first point of tension, which may then restrict your quadriceps ability to fully extend the knee. So that ability to actually feel where your knee is stretched might be restricted by the postural alignment that you have just standing naturally. And then you're feeling like, oh, I can't feel that muscle engaging. It feels like it's working, but it's not actually getting me to that fully extended line that I'm trying to create. So definitely something to be aware of there.
I would love to talk specifically about fifth position because this is one that I hear a lot from fellow adult dancers and also have struggled with. And many of us feel like it is almost impossible to close in fifth position without softening or bending the knee or lifting the heel of the standing leg to kind of, I don't know if that's considered a cheat, but a lot of us feel like we just can't. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on like, is it even possible if you have hyperextension in your legs to close in fifth position without some sort of softening in the legs?
I think it depends on how extended your knee is when you're working, right? Like if you, for example, let's say you do a tendu to the front, if your tendu is not overly extended, then when you close your leg, you're not going to see as much of a degree of change when it comes into fifth, right? Or if you don't close your fifth all the way and you just close at the top of the thighs and your feet stay separate, that thing. And I think that's kind of what I've talked about before online is where it's like, well, if I were to close and keep both my knees perfectly as stretched as much as I possibly could, my heels are not going to come together. And if I want my feet to come together, then at least one of my knees is going to need to soften,
Yeah.
right? Something else we often see with dancers is when they're standing in first position, one knee stretches and then the other one kind of stretches in front of it. So like you'll kind of have like the knees not really meeting at the back, one's kind of in front of the other knee. And because one knee is fully extending, usually the leg that's going to end up being that standing leg, and then the other leg doesn't fully extend. So it's just trying to find that balance. I personally, I never found the ability to fully keep my knees 100% locked out and be able to close fifth position. Like it just wasn't possible. I had enough hypermobile range in my knees that it wasn't something I could do. Yeah, you can come up to releve and then lower down, but then again, we're making these constant shifts over the ball of the foot, which potentially is putting more strain on the second metatarsal. So that's not necessarily the best way to do it either. Personally, I think it's like look at yourself in the mirror, get a camera, video yourself, see what the minimal amount of change you can have in your legs is. And then it's just this process of kind of refining and figuring out where your positions are, what's going to work best for your anatomy. And if you have a teacher who's constantly correcting it, maybe go to them after class and just be like, look, I've got this massive amount of hyperextension that if you look at how much range I have, like this is why my knee is closing. Ask them if they have any tips for that. But if they say, oh no, you just have to keep it straight, well, maybe they're just not aware of how to work with hypermobility. Because in the in the grand scheme of the history of ballet, hypermobile ranges have really been a recent development, right? Like if we go back, let's say before Sylvie Guillaume, right? Let's go back before the 1980s. Dancers generally were not selected for hypermobility. They were selected for more stable joints. The build of the dancer was slightly different. It wasn't these extreme extensions and extreme lines that we have today. So these days we're selecting more for hypermobile ranges, and even medical professionals are recommending to dancers with Ehlers-Danlos, and there's been research around this that shows that potentially ballet could be beneficial for people with hypermobile ranges. So there's been some recommendation for people who have hypermobile capacity to go into dance. And that's then leading to dance now having to adjust and say, okay, well, we didn't used to have to train for this, and now we have to figure out how to help, right?
Yeah. So do you have any tips for how we can, as dancers, discern that line between softening the knee, specifically talking about closing in fifth position, softening the knee for the amount that is like absolutely necessary versus maybe what is more than needed? Like, is there a feeling that we should be looking for to know what that line is?
I think it's probably less a feeling again, because if we're talking about it from a feeling perspective, then it's going to be something that is very difficult because the proprioceptive connection is maybe not there. So visual input is a really good way to do it, especially using video. Because if you have something where like you take a video of yourself, oftentimes, first of all, when you take a video of yourself, the way that you look on the video is generally not how you feel internally. Like they don't always connect, right? And oftentimes, like you'll go and you'll watch a video, and you're like, I didn't think I looked like that, or even to the opposite is like, I look better than I thought I looked. It can happen as well. So the disconnect between the reality of what we look, and obviously video is not a perfect reflection of reality, but it's going to give you that feedback relatively quickly as well, where you can kind of go frame by frame and see, where's my knee starting to bend in the movement? Is it bending a lot? Could I reduce that amount of bend? And then you can slow down the tendu and really work meticulously, just practicing very slowly to see, okay, am I able to, in that moment, like let's say between the extended tendu and when the heel hits the floor, am I able to maintain a straight knee? Yes. As my heel hits the floor, is that when I start to feel the more tension in my hip that's restricting movement? Am I starting to feel that my knee is going to start to bend? Okay, now I'm starting to make those connections between where in the movement that's happening, and now I can then start to practice just in that range, like working on just maybe from fifth position out to fourth, or from fourth back into fifth, trying to work to maintain as much engagement through that leg as possible, not to overstretch or to bend, but like just to keep it within that range of the knee is supported, the leg is moving nicely, and everything is staying in a relatively clean line.
Yeah, that's helpful. So the exercise you're saying would be to be moving with your foot fully on the ground, full contact, moving from fourth, pulling back into fifth with full contact.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And you can do that. You can do that in any direction, right? You can do that to the front. You can do that to the side. You can do that to the back. So you can go out to second position as well. And just finding that kind of shift between those 2 points. Because really, if we look at the positions of the feet anyway, like that's what fourth and second are for. Fourth position was designed to be able to move us forward and back, and second position was designed to be able to move us side to side. So if we think about the tendu going through those positions, it's there specifically to allow us to extend our leg in those directions, right?
Yeah.
And so just kind of working within that fourth to fifth or second to fifth position, that's going to give us the stability on the standing leg, always taking it from the standing leg first. Like I always think about how much am I rotating on the standing leg? Am I finding that external rotation from the top of my femur? Are the deep rotators starting that movement? And then from there, am I engaging both my quadricep and my hamstring enough to make sure that the leg is not overextended, but then also trying to make sure that the knee is not bending because the hamstring is engaging too much in the close, right? Like we think about what the muscles do predominantly, like the quadricep is there to extend the knee, and then the hamstring is predominantly going to flex the knee.
Yeah.
So as we're starting to close our fifth position, is my hamstring starting to kind of squeeze more than my quadricep, and then is my knee kind of starting to bend because that's happening as well. So just kind of having that deeper awareness around what muscles are engaging through what part of the movement, and visually seeing that through video can help a lot.
Yeah, that's really helpful because I think there are a lot of things where we are trying to know how we feel, but that makes sense what you're saying about not necessarily looking for a feeling as much in this case specifically because of the proprioception issue that might be there, that looking for a feeling isn't necessarily going to be the best answer in this case. It's going to be watching video. So that's super helpful and something that I'm going to do this week. I'm going to just video myself doing tendus to see if I can figure out that sweet spot because I hadn't even really fully put together, that if you're someone who also maybe lifts the heel too soon when you're working your tendus, that bad habit can kind of translate also into not using your hyperextension to the best of your
Well,
ability.
and even looking at it from the perspective of like the heel on the ground helps to maintain turnout.
Yeah.
So if as soon as you lift the heel, you are reducing contact with the floor. So we're losing that third point of the tripod of the foot, right? Like if we look at the foot, we have the big toe, the little toe, and the heel, and just dispersing weight evenly through the whole foot is what's going to give us the best contact in that sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That totally
So
makes
then
sense.
if we're constantly lifting and changing and lifting and changing, now not only are you struggling with the proprioception of your knees, but also every time you lift your heel and put it back down, you're changing your balance point as well.
Yeah.
So now you've got multiple inputs going at the same time. It's not just the knees. Now you're trying to figure out, am I balanced? Am I maintaining rotation on my standing leg? And that's constantly changing, which is then shifting your balance and awareness for the other parts of your body too.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is actually a perfect segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you about was just that so many dancers with hyperextended knees commonly experience feeling unstable in their standing leg, especially in balances, anything where one leg is coming off the ground, like a développé is in center. So, how does hypermobility or hyperextension play into stability?
Yeah, I mean, what can tend to happen, and what I've experienced from being told by teachers that I've worked with is that because of the knee extending behind the hip line, in order to find your balance, you're going to have to shift your weight farther over the ball of the foot to counterbalance the compensation of where the knee is. The risk in doing that is kind of like what I talked about just before, in that if you shift too far over, at some point the femur is going to be restricted in its rotation because eventually you're going to drop into the hip to try and maintain that, because the foot can only do so much, right? Like if you're shifting all of your weight over the ball of the foot and there's not a lot left on your heel and you're not going up on releve, you're staying on a relatively flat foot, your hip is going to try to compensate that shift. And as soon as you drop into the hip, the deep rotators start to extend. And as the deep rotators extend, it reduces their ability to contract, and then they're not doing their job to rotate the femur, right? So what I always think about is like thinking about trying to keep the top of my pelvis over the line of my midfoot. So it doesn't mean that I'm shifting too far over the ball of the foot. I'm also not shifting my weight back onto my heel. And it may look like my pelvis is slightly more shifted over towards the ball of the foot, but I still have enough weight on my heel that if I needed to shift in the opposite direction, I could do that as well, right? Like, because sometimes we have to shift off the foot towards the extended leg, not always going up onto relevant. And it's kind of like this dynamic feeling of like, I need to find the ability to be able to move back and forth with relative speed as opposed to it being a static position.
Yeah.
So, for example, if I'm doing a développé à la seconde and I want to counterbalance the weight of my leg, which is now way out here, yes, there will be some shift over that standing leg so that I can counterbalance that leg. But it shouldn't be so much now that I'm dropping into the hip, twisting my hips towards that extended leg, and then losing the ability to actually stand on the leg, which is connected to the floor, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes we put a little bit too much fundamental pressure on this idea of like, use your core, use your core, use your core, and not enough on understand where your foot is on the floor, because the foot is actually what's connected. And while that foot is sending signals up through our spine and the core is doing its job to support us, this is the power, like the core is the power center of the body, right? It's going to allow us to have pressure through our legs, have pressure through our arms, and be able to move relatively well while supporting our spine. But it's the foot connection to the floor that's sending the signals up through the body to tell the core, yes, you need to adapt here or strengthen here or contract there, right? So how your foot is connecting to the floor is going to be the first, like, most important part. And if you're shifting too much over the ball of the foot, again, you're losing a lot of that connection.
So, I mean, obviously, the amount that you're shifting is going to be different for everybody and probably relative to the amount of hyperextension that you have. Are there any exercises or things that you recommend to dancers who are trying to figure out where that spot is so that they can get comfortable finding it quickly?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of my favorite things to get dancers to do is to stand on one foot and close their eyes, because what it immediately does, and this is kind of the opposite side of the training to what we were talking about before with having that visual input. Now we completely remove visual input and we force the feeling, right? Because when we look at balance and we look at what's going to create or help us to balance, the number one thing is obviously going to be the fluid within the ears, the inner ear balancing of that. Then we have the visual field, so what we can see and how that then relates to that inner ear balancing. And then the proprioception of our foot on the floor. So basically the nerve sensations being sent up again through the spine and telling us, yes, you're upright or you're sitting down. What are the connections to maybe a chair or to standing that we're having? And how is that then going to impact the spine's ability to maintain an upright position, right? If we then take that into dance, for example, and we are very visually field based and we're looking at ourselves in the mirror all the time, we're constantly doing this. Sometimes the balance that we find when we can see ourselves is different to the balance that we would find if we can't see ourselves. So often something that I would experience as a dancer is I would find this amazing position in the class, and then I would go on stage when I no longer had the mirror and completely feel like I had no balance anymore, right? So taking away that visual field and just practicing what it feels like to have your foot kind of wobble, which happens immediately. As soon as you close your eyes, your foot's kind of starts going like this. All the little muscles like start engaging. The ligaments in your ankles start to like connect, and tendons are going, and like everything's working, right? And it's not easy. So finding the connection in the floor with your eyes closed, where you're taking away that visual field and just practicing that, trying to build up to a minute where you're not wobbling very much and you're able to really stabilize, is a really good practice to improve that just that fundamental proprioceptive awareness in your feet.
Yeah, I'll feel like the longest minute of your life, I bet.
It's kind of like a plank in that regard, right?
Yeah, totally. Time stands still for that minute. I know it's great.
Right.
It is really wild. Just, I mean, it always makes me laugh because when you think about being in a ballet class and all of the crazy things that we're doing, and then it's like, okay, just stand on one foot with your eyes closed. And it's like the hardest thing you'll do all day. But yeah, it is. That's a really helpful thing to know that that actually helps with finding that as well, and that it's all interrelated. Thank you to Orza for sponsoring today's episode. Ballet asks a lot of our bodies, and our feet are often the first place we feel it. Especially as adult dancers, balancing our training with busy lives, old injuries, long days, and limited recovery time, taking care of ourselves really matters. And that's why I love Orza ballet slippers. Orza was created by professional dancer Seth Orza, who experienced firsthand the need for better, smarter slippers. After developing severe plantar fasciitis, he created the first ever patented shock-absorbing ballet shoes, designed to support your body with modern footwear technology while still maintaining the traditional ballet aesthetic. Because they're designed to help reduce fatigue, improve stamina, and prevent injuries, you can focus more on your dancing and less on pain management. I started wearing the Orza Pro 2.0 earlier this year and have never looked back. The shock absorption has virtually eliminated chronic pain in my right foot, and they've made such a difference in how I feel both during and after class. If you're an adult dancer like me, you know how important it is to take care of your body so you can keep doing what you love. Visit orzabrand.com and use code AFTERCLASS5 for $5 off your new favorite ballet slippers. Links included in the show notes. I know something that I have heard a lot, and a lot of other adult dancers with this hypermobility will hear, is corrections like pull up and engage your quads. So what are some of the most common corrections you've heard or received, even as someone who has hypermobility, and how can dancers actually achieve what's being asked for, even if the correction maybe is not the best way to say it, or maybe it's a great way to say it, I don't know, but
Yeah. Pull up is an interesting one, because there's a difference obviously between a correction and a cue. Like we can cue things, and especially if you're working with a group of dancers for a very long period of time, you can say like one or two words and they understand the intention behind it. Like if you've had that constant um, work together and like they know where you're coming from and they know your background. Like we used to have a teacher that would just say sand, and we knew that that meant like flick your toes across the sand to get that kind of connection of the foot in the floor. But she would just say sand, and that would be what came out. So pull up is kind of one of those for me. It's like, okay, well, what am I pulling up? Am I pulling up my head? Am I pulling up my shoulder? Like what's pulling up? Because it can be interpreted in so many ways, and when it's left to too much open interpretation, it's like, well, what am I doing? And if you're always pulling up, then you're not grounding yourself either. So there has to be this kind of oppositional force through the body. Like, yes, we're lifting, we're creating engagement in the upper body, so we're not slouching and dropping into a rounded position in our spine, but then also like stretching our legs, like drilling into the ground, like growing tree roots into the floor is also important, because otherwise, we're not creating that connection with the floor in opposition. So opposition, for me, opposition is actually like one of the best things we can work on, right? What is the oppositional force? So if like my knee is stretching and stretching and stretching and stretching, I'm not just going to be pulling up my quadricep. I'm also going to be kind of connecting the hamstring to make sure that I'm not overstretching my knee and locking into just a locked out knee position. Because one of the things that hyperextended dancers tend to find is that they can create the illusion that their knee is straight without actually using any muscles to do it.
Yeah.
Like I can have a straight knee. My kneecap can be completely floppy. My patella tendon is completely relaxed. The quadricep is not doing anything to help support that knee, but my knee is straight. And that's when we have the higher risk of overstretching the knee or going into damaging that PCL or putting the knee in an unsafe position, because then it's more susceptible to rotational forces. It's more susceptible to that overextension. So thinking about it from the perspective of muscular engagement to support the joint as opposed to pull up or engage or do this, right? And so then we start thinking, okay, well, to what degree? How much do I need to engage my quadricep? Is it really feasible to be activating the muscle for the entire movement? Do we need to relax it sometimes? There's this kind of give and take, right? And understanding then the difference between eccentric versus concentric contractions. So a muscle can contract as it's relaxing. It could also contract as it's moving the joint, right? So it can act as the agonist or the antagonist in the situation. So for example, if I go to stretch my knee, then the quadricep is going to be the agonist. As I go to bend my knee, then the hamstring is going to be the agonist, but they're opposite to each other the entire way through. So like as I'm stretching, my hamstring is the antagonist. As I'm bending, my quadricep is the antagonist. So they're always working to some degree, but they're working in opposite directions.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I would say, like to dancers, if we're thinking about from a corrective perspective, like what's going to be beneficial, what's not going to be beneficial, obviously just saying pull up is like, okay, well, what am I doing? Right. That's not going to help. But saying, hey, at that point, right as the leg is about to close, you can relax your quadricep a little bit so that it's not overextending and trying to get stuck in that position, right? And the hamstring is going to engage anyway because it's going to connect with rotation. It's going to help to stabilize the leg as it closes. It's important to work in that point, as are the adductors, as are the hip flexors. There's this weird thing that happens in the dance world where we start to get really specific about muscles. We say, well, this muscle does this or this muscle. And while it does, at any given point, no one is sitting there and analyzing, okay, is my quadricep doing this right at this point? Like what percentage of quadricep engagement do I need in the développé all as it going, right? We know that it's going to stretch your knee. We know that as the knee is bent, it's going to help to flex the hip, but realistically what we are trying to do in bringing awareness to those muscles is like, okay, understand that they're working, that they need to be strong, and is it functionally enhancing the movement or not, right? Like, are you feeling restricted, right? Because another thing that will often happen in, like, for example, in an extension a la seconde, you do your développé, you get out there and it starts to kind of shake and you feel like you can't fully stretch it, but it's also not going any higher. It's because the quadricep and the hamstring are fighting each other. They're in this battle. Like one side is trying to stretch the knee, one side is being stretched. So the hamstring is being stretched as you're lifting, which is restricting the quadriceps ability to fully extend the knee, which is then causing you to feel like you're in a gripping sensation, right? And then you'll have a teacher come and say, stop gripping, right? And you're standing there, it's like, well, I have hyperextension and I don't even know why my knee's not fully extended. Yeah. What's going on? Nothing's working. So in that moment, it's more like, okay, well, what's restricting me from being able to use the muscles the way that they want to work? So potentially the hamstring is tight in that sense, right? Potentially the hamstring is stopping you from being able to engage and fully extend the knee. And look, in a ballet class, you're not going to have the time to say, okay, sit down, let's analyze this, right? So again, it comes down to kind of personal practice.
I would like to talk a little bit too about how dancers who have hyperextended knees, how they can think about training in a way that is encouraging versus frustration inducing, because I know, again, as someone who has experienced this, like, it can get to a place where you kind of feel defeated. Like, I definitely have had moments where I'm like, I'm just never going to be able to do X, Y, and Z because I can't, get my legs straight, or I can't close in this position. So as someone who, again, has personally walked this journey, are there even just mindset tips or training tips for staying in a positive frame of mind while working with this issue?
Yeah, I think first of all, it starts with some acceptance of what your body can do, right? Like we have to understand, first of all, ballet, especially in how ballet is taught these days and the class structure, ballet is a system that was designed class structure wise in the middle of the 19th century, right? Like before that, yes, ballet is much older, but we didn't really have classes the way that we do now, where you would go to the bar and you do your set of exercises and then you come in center and do it and then jumps, right? So this is really something that is, we're getting close to 200 years old in its design, and it was not designed with any type of anatomical abnormalities in mind, right? So obviously over the last 200 years, we've had some advances in the understanding of sports science and medicine, and we can approach things in it from a different perspective now and have a healthier dancer body. And then we can look at it and say, okay, well, knowing that you do have some hypermobility in your knees, I'm not going to force you to get your heels together in first position every time, because it's probably not going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean we go to your full extension of your knee stretch and that's where you live. But if you do extend your leg all the way and you close into fifth, because I don't necessarily want to see you bending your knee to close, wherever that comes with a straight leg, that's where you end up closing to, and that's perfectly fine, right? And having that internal acceptance, regardless of what any teacher says to you, is going to be important, right? The other thing is, like, if you're closing into fifth position, a little bit of relaxation in the working leg is going to happen because it has to. As long as you're getting to your full extension when the leg is gesturing, when it's out there and it's working, that's what we want to have, right? Yeah. And if your knees are supported and the joints are being well protected because your muscles are working correctly, that's really what is most important. Not, how stretched are my knees, how flat is my turnout, any of that stuff. And especially when we're working with adults who are doing this for enjoyment and for, to get into the studio and move and enjoy the music. Like, the last thing you want to be doing is stressing out about how stretched your knees are. Like, that's not what is most important here. Like, let's take it and look at the priorities of what we're trying to do. Stretch the knee to the point that it needs to be to support your movement, but not to a point that it's going to cause you problems or to stress you out that, like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's the end of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's encouraging too, even just because I know, you've danced professionally, and there's other professional dancers who have experienced hyperextended knees, and, like, it doesn't impede your ability to dance at the end of the day. Like, you can still dance beautifully, and I think sometimes the hard part for adult dancers is, I was talking to someone else about this recently, how class kind of becomes the, like, end all and be all for us because we may or may not be getting performance opportunities. And so what's happening in the classroom kind of becomes the end goal, versus for someone in a professional or pre-professional, the goal is actually being able to dance and move on stage. And so I think for adults too, it's balancing that mindset of, even if there's certain things on a technical level, like closing in fifth, that you have to, soften your leg to come in. It doesn't mean that you can't dance ballet beautifully at the end of the day and still achieve all the things that you want to achieve. So that's definitely encouraging.
I mean, look, I remember being in class and there were other guys in the class that had equally as hyperextended knees as I did, and they had one knee stretched the whole time and the other knee was bent most of the time. Like, these are professional dancers, right? So we're not even questioning the fact that they can do what they needed to do. And it was more about speed of work, continuity of movement, being able to move correctly through the positions, but not to the point where you're so obsessed with this level of perfection that it's actually stopping you from enjoying what you're doing or being able to move, right? I think, and I think sometimes like this is actually a thought process that comes across a lot. Are we asking dancers to be so perfect that they're no longer feeling free? Like, is perfection stopping them from being able to move? Is it reducing their artistic expression? Are they so fearful that they're going to make a mistake that they're actually not trying to, you know, actually dance, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a big thought process, and even taking that into your classwork, it's like, okay, today I'm just going to focus on one thing, and that focus is like rotating my standing leg. And everything else is just like pure joy. Like, I can feel the port bra and I can use my head and find all this coordination. But the focus for today is rotation in my standing leg, right? And if you just take it from that perspective, and then you can layer things on over time and develop and find your pathway. But it shouldn't ever be like, well, my foot wasn't pointed enough and my leg is not turned out and my knees are not stretched and then my posture's like, if you start putting so much expectation and pressure on just getting through tendus, like, you're not going to get any farther. That's going to be the end of it, right? So I think sometimes it's just like, okay, you know what? Today I'm not worried about my knees. My knees will be what they are. I'm going to work on this. I'm going to work on fluidity of port bras, or I'm going to work on coordination of movement, or I'm going to work on speed in my feet. Like, there's so many other things that we can focus on that, don't worry about the knees. Just
Yeah.
let them be for a little while, as long as they're safe.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think that's such a great perspective, especially for adults, because I think, when you start and you're coming into the classroom setting, and again, that's like your whole lived experience. A lot of times for adults is no performing, no learning variations, it's just class. And so ballet kind of becomes only about the technical execution of class, and then it's hard to know how to adjust your own mindset so that way class can be more for you, especially when you get into center and you start, doing adagio and things like that, because that might be your only chance to really experience dancing. And so it's always this tricky balance I find for myself and other adult dancers of like, what is class going to be for me today?
It kind of plays into something I talked about recently, where I remember back when I was dancing, I always felt like I had to perform for whoever was teaching. So it was not performing for myself. It was, I want you to do it like this. So you have to, like, when you come in, like, I want this level of expression and this type of movement. And it wasn't really until after I retired that I could go and take a class and just feel that freedom, right? And that's something now, like, sometimes I'll just come into my little studio here and I'll put on music and I'll dance. And it's more just about kind of exploring the movement than it is even about saying, okay, I have to have perfect turnout. I have to have perfectly stretched knees. My legs have to be up by my ears. And I think, as adults going into a class and taking the technical elements and working on them, obviously, because that's part of it. But then the whole purpose for the technique is not just to be technical. The purpose for the technique is to create more freedom for you to be able to move. So the more you can utilize your technique without having to think about it, that's when that freedom comes out. And we get to that level of unconscious competence where everything just flows. And that's really what everyone's dream is like. It's like, I want to float in the pirouettes and I want to do endless balances that just feel like they could go on forever. And, I want to use my port bras. And at the end of the day, like that, at no point in any of that are we talking about how stretched or unstretched your knees are, right? Like, if you're drawing that movement through and you're really feeling the music and connecting with it, and you kind of hit that level of synergy between your dancing and the musicality in the room, that's really what we're all searching for.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. That's what we're working towards.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Amen to that. Before we wrap up, are there any things that you would say to adult dancers, even just from a safety and health standpoint for taking care of their bodies if they experience this issue?
Strengthen the muscles that surround the knees as much as you possibly can. I know there's still this unfounded fear around going to the gym and lifting weights and doing that because of the thought process that it's going to make you bulky or tight or restricted. As long as you're working through full range of motion and stretching and doing all the things that then go with that, odds are you're just going to end up healthier and stronger. And any type of muscle hypertrophy is going to be specifically there to ensure that the muscle is there to do its job, as opposed to struggling to keep up. So I think we know so much more about cross training now anyway. Ballet is a very specific type of movement. It has its strengths, but it also has its weaknesses. So making sure that you're doing work in parallel is very important. Developing even just basic proprioceptive awareness, things like standing on one foot with your eyes closed. I'm not a massive fan of unstable surface training with weights. I know there's like this kind of been this big push with dancers where they get onto Bosu balls and they do squats and stuff on Bosu balls and stuff. It's like that's fun. It's it's good to kind of challenge your balance, but there have been studies that have shown that doing that with some sort of weighted addition, so like taking dumbbells and standing on a Bosu ball and doing it that way, your body is working so hard to stabilize itself that you're going to fatigue before you can actually get the strength increases. And so the likelihood that it's going to help you from a strength perspective is less. The science kind of shows that unstable resistance is a better way to go. So if you have, for example, if you want to do lunges with a weight on the opposite side of your standing leg, that's an unstable resistance. If you want to do like shifting weights or water weights or things that can add some difference to your body having to adjust while you're doing that, but the surface is stable, you're going to have a better result from that. And then as far as just, make sure you're warming up properly before class, make sure your heart rate is elevated, your breath rate is a little bit heightened as well, so you're not getting any type of oxygen deficit as a result of training. And then make sure you cool down and stretch afterwards. Like do the 15 to 20 minutes of mobilize your hamstrings, mobilize your hip flexors, get the adductors open again, that kind of thing, before you go home or sit in the car to go home and relax on the couch.
Yeah. Yeah. All great advice. Thank you. So how can people connect with you, follow you, etc.?
Probably the biggest platform obviously is Instagram. I'm at Athletistry on Instagram, but I'm also Athletistry on TikTok, Athletistry Official on YouTube. And then workshops are on my website, so athletistry.au/workshops. And then I've just launched a new community on School called the Athletistry Project. So there is a free option there if people just want to jump in and talk about ballet and watch some of the videos I've got up. And then obviously I have like higher tiers as well that they can connect with me on a deeper level. So
awesome. So is that like a ballet coaching platform?
Yeah. So my idea is to make it kind of like a place where teachers, dancers, students, pre-professionals can come and ask questions, communicate about the dance world, experiences that they're having in the classroom, talk about strength training, talk about professional development. It's just starting out, so there's not a lot in there at the moment, but as people come in and they start to ask questions, then the content is going to be very much developed for the community. So it's not like just, hey, here's a plie and here's a tendu, and I can go deeper on a lot of stuff too. Because part of the issue that I have found with social media in the past is like you can't really explain something in a minute and a half, and that's what a lot of short form content is limited to. So while YouTube is good, the amount of people who maybe have time to sit down for 10 to 20 minutes and watch a YouTube video is also restricted. So if there's a place where we can just come and like you can read a forum post about, hey, this is how I approach this, and then maybe there's a video attached or a short course that they can pick up at any time. That's what I'm putting together.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. And I'll make sure to link all of this in the show notes. So for everyone listening, they can find you and connect with you and follow you. So thank you so much for being here today and for your time.
Thank you for having me, Hannah.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a friend or leave a quick review. It really helps more adult dancers find the podcast. All the links and resources we mentioned today are waiting for you in the show notes. And if you want more adult ballet content in between episodes, come hang out with me on Instagram at @thebusybunhead. See you next week after class.